so much for joining me. If you haven't been here before, my name is Tracy and this is a DIY upcycling channel. And today I want to make a romantic top. I want it to look very vintage and have really pretty details. And I'm starting with this fairly average thrifted cotton top, but it does have some pretty embroidery details and some mother of pearl button. So we have a good start here. Let's get to it. Real fast, I forgot to mention I will be tea staining this, so I'm trying to use all natural fabrics like cotton and linen. The first thing I did was put this top on, and then I looked in the mirror and I had my pins with me, and I stuck a pin where I wanted my finished top to be, and then in the back I stuck a pin where I want the finished back to be, and they're different heights. Now I'm going to take my top and fold it in half. Here's one pin in the center in the front. I'm going to fold it in half this way so I can see the pin in the back and this pin in the front. Now here's the pin in the front and here's the one in the back. And I am going to cut and just eyeball this from this pin to this pin. So now I want to cut it again because I want to add a 7-inch ruffle. So this time I'll measure all the way around at 7 inches and cut that off. I'll make dashes all the way around with my ruler and my tailor's chalk. Now I'm just going to cut along those dashes. Now I want to cut my sleeves. Here's what this looks like so far. And this sleeve is not quite a full sleeve. It comes a little bit above my wrist, but I want to add my own sort of flare and ruffles to this. So I am going to cut 4.25 inches off both sleeves. Now the sleeves are a little shorter, and what I want to do now is there's a seam at the top of the shoulder right here. I am going to cut this sleeve, just eyeballing it up to that line, but not through this shoulder seam yet. Okay, so I brought out a little pile of some of my vintage painted, embroidered, stitched linens, and I'll pick through here to add parts to this top. I get most of these at thrift stores, eBay, things like that. And then I have a little pile of fine lace. I tried to pick kind of my thinnest ones that had a lot of detail and sort of more flowy than the thick, stiff ones. Next thing I want to do is insert some embroidery into the sleeve and make it have more volume. And I'm going to use this runner with this cute little embroidered girl and a little bird. And I'll use one of these on each side. My slit here is 14 inches. So I think I'm going to cut this at 14.5 inches just to give myself a little extra wiggle room. I'm going to cut this bottom trim off, but I'm leaving the sides. And I already marked where my 14.5 inches is. And now I can just cut straight across that line. And now I'll prep this one the same way I did this. So this little lady has a couple weak spots here, maybe moth holes or something. So what I'm going to do is just take a scrap piece of this linen, Cover that up, and I'll do 3 rows of zigzag stitch right over top of it. It'll look aged and mended. And there's a little spot here and a little spot here. I'll do the same thing, and I'm going to use sort of an antique gold color, not metallic though. Now I want to prep this to sew my linen to the insert here. What I have to do is open this up a little bit so I can see the slit. So here's my shoulder seam at the top, and this is where we cut that slit. Now I need to seam rip. So my lady here is 11 inches across, and I want to do a little pleating at the shoulder and make this sort of puffy. So what I'm going to do is take my seam ripper and seam rip from this line 3 inches and 3 inches. So I'll just make little marks here so I know where to stop. And I'll get that seam ripped open, and I will do the same on the opposite side as well. Okay, this is what we have so far. Now, we just are hanging on by a little bit of fabric right here. We can go ahead and snip that all the way open. Now I want to sew my little linen panels inside of there. So I will just sew one side over here and the opposite side to that cut edge over here. Now on mine, I'm going to do wrong sides together because that will make these pretty little scallops show, and they'll just be another little detail on the top. I'll just show you a little bit more detail how I will do that. So here's my cut open sleeve. I will take my piece of linen, put wrong sides together, and on this one I'm going to start at the bottom because I want to get as much of that girl as I can, and I will not pin this. I will just take it right to my machine, and I'll line up the edge of the shirt fabric with the seam. That way the scallops will be untouched, and just sew a straight stitch all the way up. Come over here and do the same thing. And I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I have wide sleeves that look like this, and I have to reattach this at the shoulder. Okay, so I turned my top inside out. And this shoulder piece, I want to sew right sides together. I thought it'd be easiest to show you on a mannequin. So what I'm going to do is, here's the end of my cut. I'm going to find the center of this and the center of this. And I'm going to pin that like this, where you can kind of almost just pinch it. Then I'm going to find the center here, find the center here, pin that, and I'll just keep doing that until my pleats are small and manageable to sew. Now I have both shoulders pinned. I'll take it to my machine, and with the straight stitch, I will just lay it in my machine starting at one end, fold my little pleats over as I go, keep sewing till I'm all the way done. When I first start, I have to start at that original seam. Mine is serged there. And then I'm going to blend it or taper it into a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, I am going to trim some excess off here with my pinking shears. They cut on a diagonal, so therefore they're cutting the bias and significantly reducing fraying. Now, a serger would be great here, but I don't have one. Here's what the shoulders look like. Getting a poofy sleeve. All right, now I want to add another little flare to the bottom of this piece. Now this is 24 inches around, and I have 2 rectangles cut from a linen tablecloth with lace and embroidery. Very pretty. This is the length I had, so it's 32 across, and this is 24. So this is 8 inches bigger. I could have gone even bigger, but that will be another flare right here. The first thing I want to do with these is fold them in half, right sides together, and the best I can, because this is a little jagged, is run a zigzag stitch 1/4 of an inch in and get these completely closed up into a sort of a circle. Okay, so this is right side out again. I have my top right side out, and I am going to overlap this 1/2 inch and sew it on. And I'm going to pin it first because this will need to be pleated. So this is my seam that I just made on this ruffle. I'm going to line that seam up with the underneath seam of the sleeve and pin it on, overlapping about 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to find the opposite end over here of that ruffle I just made, the opposite end of the sleeve, and I will pin that together overlapping. This raw seam will be covered with something pretty, so it's okay that it's on the outside. Now I'm going to find the center here, pin, and just keep doing that until my gaps are smaller and smaller and it's time to sew. Now I have both sleeves pinned, and I will slide this into my machine and start underneath, go forward back with a straight stitch, and I will just fold these little mountains over the same direction as I sew all the way around. And I'm trying to keep the edge of my presser foot lined up with the edge of this ruffle here. That's what those are looking like. And now at the seam down, I want to add a row of assorted pretty lace pieces. Now I'm just cutting some of the borders off these doilies, and I want them approximately 3.5 inches tall. Now, because I want them assorted going around the sleeve, something like this, I'll have to cut smaller, or that will go all the way around. And I want different pieces. Yeah, maybe 8-inch sections. Okay, here's my top, the sleeves. So what I'm going to do now is take this to my machine, slide it back in, and I will take my little pile of lace trim to the machine with me, And I will just start sewing. I will slide this in, put my needle in, and go forward back. And I'm going to use a zigzag stitch on this. And as I sew, I will do a teeny bit of pinch pleating, not much, because when you cut a circular doily, I'm trying to get a good shot like this, when you straighten it up, it has sort of a natural curve. But if I have a straighter piece, I may have to pinch pleat that a little bit more. Otherwise, I think something like this, I might be able to just sew kind of straight on. And then I'll just overlap about an inch, find a new piece. Just keep on going all the way around. Okay, here's what the sleeves look like. Now I'm going to do a little something to the back. And I have this doily, table scarf, whatever you want to call it. It feels kind of synthetic to me. So it may not tea stain, but that may be pretty. It might even stand out more. I'm going to risk it. So I want to cut out sort of this solid piece just right here. I don't want to, it's too big for the whole back. Now I have it all pinned on, and I'm going to use a zigzag stitch and stay fairly close to the edges and get that all sewn. Now what I want to do is just a decorative piece of sort of lace from this seam down into the bottom of these buttons on both sides. And I have this, which very similar to the arms. So I think this will be enough. I'm going to cut about a 1.5 inch border off of that, and hopefully I'll have enough for both sides. And yay, I have enough. So I am going to start sewing this. I'll use a zigzag stitch. I'll probably come in about 1/2 inch so that this lays nicely. If I go too close to the edge, sometimes they have a tendency to flip up like that. I'll start at that seam, run underneath of this little collar line next to the buttons, and I'm going to bring both of these pieces in at the bottom of that button row. I want them to stop there. That's what those look like. Now I want to make 2 little pockets for the front. I'm going to use a U-shaped pattern for the pockets, and it's super simple to make this pattern. So I just cut a piece of paper 6.5 inches tall, 5 inches wide, fold it in half, and then I just did a little curve right here and cut that out. Okay, so I have this pretty piece of embroidery, and I'm going to cut out 2 of these for the pockets. Now, I like the fold in this because that's how I sort of look at it and center it. And I want the image down towards the bottom of the pocket because I will be folding this over and adding a little lace. So I want this as low as I can get it. And then I'm just going to trace. Now I'm going to trace one more because I want 2 pockets, and then I'll cut them out. So then I took that same pattern and I cut out 2 pieces of just that cotton fabric that we originally cut off the shirt, and that will be my lining. And now I want to pin them together. I'm using my cutting mat because it's easier to pin than on this tablecloth. I have the blue tablecloth so you can see the contrast in the white, so you can see the fabrics better. So I'm just putting these right sides together. I'm going to pin around here, leaving the top open on both of these. Now, with a straight stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to sew around the U shape, but not across the top. Now I have these all sewn, and before I turn them right side out, whenever you have a curve, you have to make little notches in your fabric so that when you turn it right side out, it lays nice and smooth. And I'm going about 1/2 inch apart here, close to that stitch line, but not through it. Now I can turn them right side out and give them a good press. Now the tops, I am going to tuck these in about 1/2 inch and press them. I already did this one. Now I'm going to do a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch down all the way across both pockets. Now I'm taking each pocket, folding it over about 3/4 of an inch, pressing it, and then I'm going to stitch that down right on the top stitch line right here. Now I have this tiny little doily. I'm just cutting a piece off like this. Yeah. And I'm going to cover that stitch line when I sew this and do a zigzag stitch right at the top of this piece of lace. Okay, so I tried the top on and pinned on my pockets. That's kind of important because it can be deceiving on a hanger or on the table. Put it on and see where you want your pockets, get them pinned on. And now I'm just going to sew. I will use a straight stitch, stay fairly close to the edge, as tidy as I can, and sew from this corner down to this corner. Okay, so that's what the pockets look like. Now I want to add a 7-inch ruffle at the bottom. Now my top is 45 inches around, and I am going to use this sort of linen tablecloth with embroidery and a little bit of applique, and I am going to cut 7 inches off this end and 7 inches off the bottom because that's the most decorative, and sew them together. So this is 45. This will be 62 inches long once it's all cut and sewn together. And that gives me like an extra 17 inches for pleating. Okay, so I need to sew these two pieces together to have a long enough piece, and I'm going to do it in a little bit of an unconventional way. I'm just going to overlap and run a zigzag stitch along here because that scallop is so pretty. And then once I get that sewn, I am going to do the same. I want this one continuous piece. So once I get that sewn, I want to sew the ends together. I'll overlap and do the same thing. Now I'm going to pin this ruffle exactly like I did the sleeves. And if you fast forwarded through that part, I will put the timestamp up in the corner so you can go refer to that. I'm going to sew this just slightly different than I did the arms. The only difference is I'm going to use a zigzag stitch instead of a straight stitch. When you're pulling something over your head, taking it on and off, a zigzag stitch has so much more give than a straight stitch. There's what that looks like. And over that seam, remember over this seam we did like a 3.5-inch piece of lace. This one I'm going to cut about a 1-inch piece of lace around some of the edges of these doilies. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did here. So then with a zigzag stitch to hide that seam basically and add another pretty detail. Now the sewing part is all done. Now I want to go upstairs and tea stain it, tea dye it. And I have these pants. I have a tutorial for them. I'll put the link down in my description. I'm going to tea stain these as well. Okay, to tea stain these, I have a huge pot and I filled it to about here because I'm doing the jeans and the shirt. If you're doing just like a shirt, you can use a smaller pot and maybe fill it to here. And I will be using 90 tea bags for this, but something this size, maybe 20. So I bought 2 boxes of these black tea off of Amazon, and they come like this. And I prepped this already. So I brought my water to a boil and then turned it off, and I put the 90 tea bags in there and let that steep sit there for 30 minutes. Take the tea bags out, and that's where I'm at now. I have the fire on just like the lowest it will go. I want it warm. And I got my jeans wet and my shirt wet, and now I'm just going to put them in there. I'll give you a closer look at what they look like going in. Now, I'm going to let this sit in here for about an hour. You can leave it as long as overnight if you want to. And then when it's done, when it's dyed, I am going to put it in my washer on a rinse and spin and then let them dry, and I'll show you what they look like. Here it is, all done. How precious is that? I am wearing it with the dress I made for my courthouse wedding. I kind of have a video on it. I didn't film the making of it, but I have a video showing close-ups and how it was made. Now, the jeans, I love how they turned out. Now they're kind of aged and tattered and worn looking. But I wasn't loving it with this shirt. My original plan was to do the reveal with it like that, with those. But I like this better. I am going to slow it down, bring it in closer so you can see more of the details. And I thank you so much for watching.